Folks, hello. It's about 5 minutes till 12 on Tuesday night, almost Wednesday morning. I think I told you guys I would continue with this conversation Tuesday night, so here we are. I just made it. We ended this morning, talking about stalemate and that both sides, the Anglo and the French and the Germans, are trying to find whatever they can to end this war along the Western Front. Tonight we're going to be discussing the Battle of Verdun. Battle of Verdun, V-E-R-D-U-N, Battle of Verdun. Again, that's V-E-R-D-U-N. Before I begin, a couple of things I wanted to mention. One, tonight, if I were to say a word and spell it out once or twice, probably pretty significant, be sure to jot that down for me. So if I say it twice, if I spell it, probably has a lot of importance. If not, if I just say it and kind of move along, don't worry about it quite as much. It's probably just minutia or background information. Number two, as you can see, I don't have any visuals tonight. I know it's hard for you to just hear my voice minus any visual cues. I'm told that by Friday I'll have access to my jump drive and my laptop, and perhaps by then I can use the powers of technology to bring you guys some imagery as well. So back to the Battle of Verdun. The date is February 1916 through December of 1916, the same year. So 216 through 1216. It is the longest battle of the war. 10 bloody months of warfare in eastern France at Verdun. Now Verdun, quaint little town, rolling hills of eastern France. It's fairly rugged, fairly undulating topography there in that part of France, but a beautiful town at Verdun. It does have a lot of value to the French. If you get one thing that I say early in this lecture, Verdun has great intrinsic value to France back then and still today. The French really hold Verdun and their performance very close to the heart. So Verdun, it's quintessentially French. Think of it in these terms. The French view Verdun as their version of Gettysburg for America, or maybe the Battle of the Somme for the English. So they hold it very close to their heart. It's also, it goes by the nickname, even globally, the moniker, the world's greatest battle, Verdun. So really, the French see it as being emblematic of all things that are positive about the French. The French willpower, the French grit, the French determination. They're very fond of their performance in this classic battle. I should mention to you that even before the battle begins, Verdun had two very important historical connotations. So again, two reasons why Verdun was so crucial, so important historically, intrinsically to France. Number one goes way back. So the first point of why Verdun was important, going back, not quite 2,000 years, but back when France was called Gaul, for you Latin enthusiasts, going back, maybe 2,000 years, to the days of the Romans, Verdun had always held a military base camp. So it had a long storied tradition of military history or militarism. Had always been a base camp back to the days of the Roman Empire. Number two, secondly, there had been built years earlier, back in the 17th century, a long string of forts, a long string of fortifications from the German frontier towards Paris. So from the east, west towards Paris. A long series of forts, or string of forts, that have been designed and built by the famous French military engineer, a man named Vauban. V-A-U-B-A-N. So V-A-U-B-A-N. Vauban was a very important part of Louis XIV, who was the Sun King's military philosophy and preparation. Great French engineer. Anyway, long story short, one of those forts was at Verdun that was designed by Vauban. 1870-71, as you recall, when the French lost to the Prussians in the Franco-Prussian War, they lost Alsace-Lorraine, they lost their dignity, it was a crushing loss. The final fort to fall in the Franco-Prussian War, you guessed it, was at Verdun. So it's hallowed ground. It was the final fort to fall during this great humiliation in 1870-71. So those two reasons explain why the French will do anything to protect the sacred city of Verdun during World War I. Let's look at the German side of things here, the German philosophy. As you know, at the end of the Battle of the Marne, General von Moltke became emotionally unstable and had to be treated mentally for the death of the Schlieffen Plan and for his part in that. So von Moltke was replaced by a man named Erich von Falkenhayn. Definitely a name for you guys to jot down. So Erich von Falkenhayn. And Falkenhayn you spell as follows: Falkenhayn. I'll say it again. Falkenhayn. Erich von Falkenhayn. Severe, very stern, pretty unlikable, even by German standards back then. He was a pretty unlikable guy. He had maybe one friend in all of Germany. So he was roundly despised by many people. But again, he had one friend, and the one friend he had was a good guy to be cozy with. His best friend was Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany. So his best friend is the Kaiser. In fact, I should mention that they had a very famous Christmas night meeting in 1915, say 2 months before Verdun. So the Kaiser speaking with von Falkenhayn, they're discussing the prospects for the war, what direction is it going? The Kaiser wants to know, are things going to work out? Will this war end well for Germany? And it was a fairly grim report, pretty dour report. And from Falkenhayn, he says to the Kaiser, if this war goes on and on, if this war continues for several years or even a year or two, we will lose. Germany will lose to the English and the French if the war goes on for too long. He tells the Kaiser, I fear the English war materials. I fear their industrialization, their industrial might. I fear their strong navy. They could blockade us. He says, we need to end this war right away, or else I can't really predict a positive outcome for us. They decide, or really Falkenhayn tells the Kaiser, we plan to end this war at Verdun. He tells the Kaiser, we're going to go to Verdun and attack them there because the French will do whatever it takes. The French will roll out more men. They will keep fighting until Verdun is under lock and key. Falkenhayn believes that they can do the most damage at Verdun because the French will do whatever it takes to protect this sacred city. And really, I would know this, folks, as well. We really associate philosophically with von Falkenhayn a war style, a philosophy, a mantra known as the War of Attrition. War of Attrition, Attrition. And really, as you hear this, it should be offensive to the human spirit, to humanity. It offends me, it probably will offend you too. But von Falkenhayn said this. He said that if we can win this war of attrition, we will win. And what that means is that Germany will accept massive losses of human life, major fatalities. We're going to accept loss of manpower, human life, war materials, artillery, infrastructure. As long as the French lose more than we do, as long as they lose more than us, we've won. If the French lose more lives than the Germans, we won the war. He wants to bleed them white, as he said. We're going to bleed the French white at Verdun. That's how we'll break through. That's how we'll punch through. We'll be in Paris before you know it. This will end the war. And all this is going to culminate with the day, February 21st, 1916 at Verdun. It's the opening stanza. It's the opening onslaught or attack. And make no mistake, guys, if I wasn't clear earlier, Verdun is a German attack, a rare German-led offensive along the Western Front in 1916, 17, and 18. It's a German offensive against France at Verdun. And as I was starting to say, it began the 21st of February, 1916. The first day at Verdun looked like this. It was a three-prong attack by Germany. There are three technologies they roll out to lead this attack on the first day at Verdun. The first one, you guessed it, massive artillery bombardment. Massive artillery. They roll out Big Bertha, they roll out smaller artillery, but this number, to put it into context, is shocking. On the first day at Verdun, 1 million German bombs are going to fall. 1 million German bombs fall the first day at Verdun. Okay, so Big Bertha and other artillery bombs the heck out of Verdun on day one to pulverize, to soften up, to weaken the city of Verdun. Secondly, should mention the inaugural appearance of the Flamethrower. The Germans roll out this gun that, you guessed it, projects walls of flame, maybe 50 and 100 yards across the landscape. So a flamethrower introduced by the Germans at the Battle of Verdun. There are anecdotes about the French seeing a wall of flames coming towards them, and they jump into a foxhole or a trench, and they come up 1 minute later and they look around and they were in a forest, and now it's nothing. It's bleak. It's vacant. There's nothing. The flamethrower is psychologically devastating as well. Number three, speaking of being devastating from a mental standpoint, thirdly, the Germans bring out new poison gas at the Battle of Verdun, the most feared of all new technologies, World War I. And ironically, the French were the first ones to use poison gas in 1914, but they didn't do it so well. It was mostly more of an irritant, maybe bothered the eyes a little bit of the Germans. But the Germans take the French idea and they magnify it and they augment it, and it's much more devastating at Verdun. So poison gas, and it's definitely an element of warfare that folks feared. It caused blistering on the outside. But in addition, if you inhale poison gas, it caused blistering down your esophagus, your internal organs. And, it also should mention it made for a really, really long, slow, and utterly painful death. So poison gas, introduced by the French, but then used by the Germans more effectively and rolled out at the Battle of Verdun. So guys, on day three and four, talking about the 25th now of February 1916, day three of the attack, the unthinkable happens from the French perspective. As I mentioned earlier, there are 19 different forts around Verdun. The largest, a whole quarter-mile across, shaped like a polygon, the largest fort at Verdun was going to fall to the Germans. It's called Fort Douaumont. Fort Douaumont going to fall 3.5 days into the war at Verdun, or the Battle of Verdun. I should spell it for you. Douaumont is D-O-U-A-U-M-O-N-T. D-O-U-A-U-M-O-N-T. Fort Douaumont is going to fall almost immediately. It was devastating to the French, and the Germans were jubilant. Back in Berlin, church bells rang. The Kaiser gave a speech and said the war is almost over. We've taken Fort Douaumont. This war is over. So the Germans were euphoric at this turn of events.